Hi, everybody. We're the Skeleton Crew, and today we are going to be talking to you about a dinosaur from the island of Madagascar. This is a really, really cool animal. We're excited to talk about it. And it's making a rude appearance on screen right now
There it
before
is.
it's supposed to be revealed. Editor, censor this, please.
Welcome
Hide
to
his
the
identity.
dinosaurs of Madagascar. It's like the penguins of Madagascar, but with more
Exactly.
cannibalism in this one.
Right. Hey, if I were an annoying child, I would say, the penguins of Madagascar are the dinosaurs of Madagascar. And everybody would say that I was cool and smart. Yes.
But does Majungasaurus like to move it?
It looks like it's moving. Yeah, they're moving. Move it.
Move it.
I don't think the penguins do that in the film.
Do they not move it? Is that
No, that's the lemur. That's King Julian.
That's King Julian. Right. I've never seen any of these films.
What? Oh, they're very funny. Yeah.
No, you know what? What?
I said I'm surprised.
Yeah, well, they came out. I think they came out at the exact moment in my life where I was feeling self-conscious for liking anything that was cartoony, and so my response was, I won't want to go see it.
James, exactly the same for me.
Is that period of time continuing now? Because I remember trying to force you to go see Into the Spider-Verse when I was in New York, and you were refusing staunchly.
You know what? No, I just don't like Spider-Man is the problem.
Oh, no, that was it. You hate Spider-Man, and that was why you didn't
I don't dislike Spider-Man. I saw Dalton visibly recoil. Yeah. I thought he was going to quit the
channel. J. Jonah Jameson in the channel. I hate Spider-Man.
I've just never particularly cared. So the phrase, like, there's a new Spider-Man movie does not elicit any emotion in me whatsoever. Sorry.
Heartbreaking.
I know. But anyway, we want to talk about the dinosaurs, so I'm going to insist that we introduce ourselves. Coming at you now, for the second time today, being on camera talking about dinosaurs, the first reason you'll learn about at some point in the future is Dr. James Napoli. I know, that's the proper response to it. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and North Carolina State University.
My name is Amelia Sutlo. I'm a PhD candidate at the American Museum of Natural History.
Coming at you, likewise, not on camera today to my knowledge, from my childhood bedroom, is Scott Johnston, the vertebrate paleontology fossil preparator and technician at Harvard University's Museum of Comparative Zoology. And take this as evidence, I've always been this way. I have not changed. I've just gotten taller and a beard.
Cool. I'm Alex Rubenstahl. I'm coming to you from Puerto Rico, where I'm on vacation and doing this out of the kindness of my heart.
Cool. I'm Dalton Meyer. I'm also a PhD candidate at Yale University, and I'm also coming at you from another location. It's a house that I'm house sitting.
You have to tell them how far it is.
Because I'm sitting down. It's not far. It's like 10 minutes away from my regular house. But it is a hassle lugging all of my equipment back and forth. Together, we're the
Skeleton Crew.
Yes, we are. And before we get into talking about Majungasaurus, just a gentle reminder: if you like this video, please throw a like on the video, leave us a comment, and if you like the stuff we make, consider supporting us on Patreon if you can. Every little bit of support helps us keep the videos coming and helps us make them as good as they can be. So thank you to all of our patrons. You'll all be thanked at the end of the video again, but we got to do the YouTuber thing apparently.
I want to make it a not so gentle reminder. Subscribe to our channel, like the video, follow us on Patreon. We're really fun over there and have a blast.
Listen, if you don't support us on Patreon, we will have to start plugging Raid Shadow Legends, and we don't want to have to do that. So please help us not do that.
We're going to start every single Raid Shadow Legend sponsor with "You made us do this."
And we're always going to call it Raid Shadow Legends.
Raid Shadow Legends.
Raid Shadow Legends.
Okay, Dalton, please release the dinosaur.
Release the beast.
Coming at you with a new pack from Raid Shadow Legends. It's Majungasaurus.
Wow.
It is Raid Shadow Legends. Oh, I like the one with the red on its face.
It's got red on you.
It's got red on. Oh, God.
There he goes.
What a stupid looking animal.
It's the
If memory serves, I think a while ago, back when I more routinely did Fossil Fridays before this thing took up all of my free time to be able to do that, I think I described it as um, a corgi unicorn sausage
That's good.
that, like, it has a really, really weirdly long body, very short, stumpy legs, and a tiny little doofy horn in the middle of its forehead. It's an
And was the apex predator of its time.
and was the apex predator of its time. It is significantly smaller
never
than you
mind.
would think an apex predator is. Like, when you think apex predator in an ecosystem, you think T-Rex, you think Giganotosaurus and stuff like that. And this guy is, like,
It's like
relatively
a horse.
small. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
horse-sized.
It's worth
How-
keeping in
how-
mind that, if alive today, would be one of the largest apex predators in any terrestrial habitat.
Yes,
Yes.
it would. But for the Mesozoic, it's a little guy.
Yeah.
It's
Designated
Well,
little
nine.
guy tier.
I've been referencing, James, your comment in, I forget exactly which video it is, but where you very incredulously say, like, when we talk about dinosaurs, we say that a mid-sized predator is like 23 feet long and weighs a ton, and you're like, a mid-sized predator's a dog.
Right.
Yes.
What
Right.
about a mid-sized sedan?
It's mid-sized
This is a
sedan.
mid-sized sedan.
Are we on the beach that makes you old?
We might be. I think they may. I think that the length on this is not horrendous. They may have made it a bit too tall. Hard to say.
Yeah,
Maybe
I
a
mean-
touch.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, because I don't think it would have hit like normal human height at the hips.
I don't.
There's
think so.
one of these mounted at Stony Brook University where I did my master's,
And at Michigan, where I did
and
my undergrad.
where I volunteered for a long time.
How old is the
but
nice
it's-
complete one that's been cast and mounted? Is it
So that
supposed
was
to be
found
an
in the
adult?
90s. We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
You mean how old it is? It like age
Yeah,
wise? Sorry,
yes. You know what people usually mean when they say that?
I thought you were asking
Well,
how old the
there's, like-
specimen was.
There's like 3 different answers to that. One is where it comes from in geologic time. 2 is when they found it in human time, and 3 is how old it is in like years.
I got a fight with I got in a fight with one of my friends about this, about how I use different words to mean those things, of just like how ancient is it, how elderly is it, and like how old is it, like in terms of historical. And Taylor, this is me calling you out on our podcast right here. I'm
Yeah,
correct.
Taylor. I like how you're doing like novel linguistic development just to be more clear.
Absolutely. So,
I don't believe that it's been histologically aged. Actually, it might have been. Let me check another paper.
I'll find one that's doing something cool. Walking the
Yeah,
block.
please do. While I type.
Ooh.
God, it has some really pretty skin.
So what does its name mean?
Yeah.
Is the thing we usually do.
So,
Scott.
Majungasaurus crenitasimus, to be specific.
Crenitissimus.
Crenitissimus?
It's not crenitasimus. That's like how I would say it.
What is this, amateur hour?
Yes.
Crenitissimus. So,
I thought you were just talking about
Majungasaurus-
its ass.
That's pretty crend in there.
Listen, if you've got it,
Majungasaurus crenitissimus. It's named after the region it was discovered, the Majunga Basin in Madagascar. And crenitissimus means most notched,
right?
in reference to the number of serrations on its teeth.
Dear viewer, can you guess that perhaps this species was named before we had more interesting material from it?
You could be right.
You'd be right. You'd actually be very correct.
Oh, so,
So-
wait, was it? Sorry, we were talking before we recorded this about the deluge of Majungasaurus papers in 2007. It was named before that. I don't
Oh,
know
yes.
anything. Okay, I don't know anything about this. So
It's got a history.
Oh, it was
okay.
named in the 1800s.
1896.
Yeah.
But as Megalosaurus. We'll get there.
Of course it was. In fact, a couple of months ago, I remember saying Megalosaurus crenitissimus, just like
yes.
that into the microphone for our Megalosaurus video.
Well, why don't we start there then? Let's talk about this critter's history.
Certainly.
Okay, so in 1955,
No. In
Before.
1896 even.
oh,
Uh,
it was named in
in
1955, right?
Well, Majungasaurus was coined in 1955.
Okay,
If you'll
gotcha.
allow me, we'll get there.
No,
In 1896, Charles Depéret, I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but it is French, and I don't know how to speak that language, and I'm not going to learn. Described Megalosaurus crenatissimus, and you may not be so surprised it was a French paleontologist because Madagascar was a French colony. Colonialism bad.
Hot takes from the skeleton.
Yeah. And it was described based off of some fragments, some vertebral chunks, a claw, and teeth. And as we mentioned, the teeth gave it the name from the serrations on the teeth. And then a while happened, a lot of time happened. And across that time, people were collecting fossils in Madagascar from this Majunga province, which is a particularly fossiliferous area. More material was collected, and then in 1955, what Alex was alluding to, René Lavacat described a dentary, and the dentary had teeth that matched the teeth in the description of Megalosaurus crenatissimus, but the dentary did not look anything like Megalosaurus, sensu stricto, just actually Megalosaurus, and so it was clear at that time in the 50s, hey, we found the dentary of this thing, presuming that the teeth are the same. And it's not Megalosaurus, so we're going to give this a new generic name, and we're going to name it Majungasaurus after the Majunga province. And there it was for a number of other years. You may recall this dinosaur being referred to by a different name, Majungatholus. I think Majungatholus is the name they use in Jurassic Fight Club. Is that correct?
It is.
Yeah.
So that's where I first learned about this animal.
Same.
Me too.
Same.
And so I was confused for a number of years. And the reason it had the name Majungatholus is because for a very long time, all we really had of Majungasaurus were fragments, the dentary that gave it the generic name, that was also made the neotype because it was determined that the teeth and the fragmentary remains weren't diagnostic. So they said, here's the neotype. It's Majungasaurus. It's this dentary. Notably, and I believe it was in the 90s, although I could be mistaken as to when it was recovered, so someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But
early 90s.
I believe it was the early 90s. A chunk of bone. No, sorry, this is in the 70s. This is in 79.
Okay.
And this is by Hans-Dieter Seuss and Philippe Taquet, who described a skull fragment that looked like the dome of a pachycephalosaur. And so that got the name Majungatholus.
Philippe Taquet did Suchomimus as well, if memory, or was it Nigersaurus? It was one of those two.
I think it was Nigersaurus.
So I remember talking about.
Yeah.
He might have
for
been on
one of
Suchomimus.
those.
But in any case,
absolutely.
No, he's who Nigersaurus is named after.
Oh, named
he
after,
described
yes.
or Ranosaurus, among others.
okay, thank you. So Majungasaurus exists, and then they find this dome. They're like, okay, here's a pachycephalosaur from Cretaceous Madagascar, and we're going to name it Majungatholus. Tholus is a name you often find with pachycephalosaurs. That suffix. So, cool beans. Unfortunately, the beans did not stay cool. Someone came and heated the beans by finding more fossils of Majungasaurus. And it turns out that what they thought was the pachycephalosaur dome was actually a part of the Majungasaurus skull, including the midline frontal horn, which is an easy mistake to make when you just have kind of a big ball of bone that clearly comes from a skull, but you don't have the rest of the skull with it. And so for a time, it was then thought that, well, the dentary that was labeled Majungasaurus is actually not diagnostic, but we can tell that there's this theropod dinosaur from Madagascar, and we're going to call it Majungatholus because that's the diagnostic type, is Majungatholus. And we're going to assign it to that taxon. Lo and behold, then there is the famous monograph of Majungasaurus that comes out in 2007. And this is a series of papers that are all published in a memoir of the Bulletin of the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology. And those papers describe the history of Majungasaurus. They describe all of the cranial anatomy. They describe almost all of the postcranial anatomy. They describe, I believe, some of the ecology and behavioral implications of the fossils. Essentially, we actually have a ton of really great material from Madagascar, obviously, of Majungasaurus. And that's all described in 2007. And as part of that description, the original dentary was revisited, determined to be, in fact, diagnostic of Majungasaurus. And so, because that name has priority, Majungasaurus is the name that we use, and not Majungatholus. And there is where we have it today.
It's a bit of...
Yes.
It's kind of a bit of lumping that the skeleton crew supports.
Well, yes, I would... Less lumping and more just clarification.
Yeah, I know.
Rare situation here.
Yeah, rare skeleton crew lump.
Just doing a bit of banter. Just.
Now, it's also, I think, worth
Normally,
noting that the neotype of Majungasaurus is the dentary that
Yes.
that Lavacat found or described.
Yeah.
Because the original material was not diagnostic, to my understanding. Like, it's a bunch of scraps, really. But
scraps.
the dentary became the neotype in, I think, 2009. So that was officially redesignated the new type reference specimen.
Did Tony Stark build it in a cave?
They're not even worth Tony Stark's attention, these scraps.
Yeah, they're not enough.
Well, Dalton said, because it was, 1890 something?
Yeah.
1896, yeah.
Well, for a dentary and a few postcranial fragments, it was one of the best known theropods at the time.
Well, the dentary wasn't known in 1896.
It was 2 teeth, a claw, and 2 vertebrae.
Gun to my head, at least within the top 20 well-represented theropods at the
Yes.
time.
I don't think there were 20.
So by definition,
Yeah.
Unless you just count different species of Megalosaurus, maybe.
I can't be wrong, because I don't know how to count.
So yeah, Majungasaurus, and I think this is something that I think people may not understand how poor the dinosaur fossil record is.
oh yeah,
And I know that for me, this is something I did not understand until I was like in graduate school. When I was an undergrad, I remember reading a paper where they were looking at like limb proportions and various other things in hadrosaurs. This is actually an interesting paper by Matt Carano, who's now the curator of dinosaurs at the Smithsonian.
I did it
and
with him a bit ago.
right, we did. We hung out with him in September, and Jim Clark and Kathy Forrester.
It was cool. That was a nice
It was a wonderful night.
Great night.
Yeah, a really, really good night. So this was Matt Carano's undergrad thesis that he did with Christine Janis when he was a student at Brown University. Christine was also one of my mentors when I was in the early stages of my career. And she's helped me out a lot over time. But anyway, this paper was looking at hadrosaurs from the lens of modern ungulates and actually showed some fairly interesting things like perceived habitat openness and different habitat types tend to be associated with hadrosaurs with and without large cranial crests, which might be responsible a little bit for depositional biases and where they're found. Like, for instance, generally speaking, the larger an ungulate's cranial ornaments are, the less time it spends in closed habitats, which makes sense because you don't want to snag your headgear on stuff.
Yeah.
So if you think about an ungulate, it's like, antelope with really, really big ornate horns live in deserts or scrubland, right?
Yeah.
It's much more rare for them to be in very closed habitats. Yes, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
The crests in lambeosaurs aren't like projecting to the sides. They're like constricted within like the lateromedial face of the skull. And also, and here's like a small detail I don't think matters. A hadrosaur is 40 feet long and multiple tons.
It's bigger than a lot of trees.
And a deer's not.
Right.
This is a
it's
fair
just
point.
breaking any branch.
I think there's some merit, if only that, like, if you have a big visual billboard, it makes more sense for an animal that lives in a more open
makes more
habitat
sense.
to then an animal that lives in a more closed habitat, just because it's easier to see.
That makes
Yeah.
a whole lot more sense, honestly.
I mean,
But-
the paper is very circumspect. Like, it's not. It's it's an idea. What does remain the case, which I do find interesting, is that in most of the North American fossil record, it is much more common to find crestless hadrosaurs than crested ones.
Mhm.
Like, lambeosaurians are quite rare. Lambeosaurus itself is known from like a couple of fossils. Corythosaurus is the best represented. Parasaurolophus is almost impossible to find. There's like
Yeah.
fewer than 10.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and
And then-
if memory serves, like Tiburcian is known for mostly just a crest.
There's, I think,
Tubicin?
3 Tubicins, 4 Chirodocristatus, and I think there's like 1 or 2 Walkeris. Like there's almost none of them. But then you get like bone beds of Edmontosaurs, Brachylophosaurs, like, and I think it's been interpreted that the areas that fossils are being deposited are heavily forested, and so this might, like, this isn't to say Lambeosaurians were rare in their environments, but it may be that they actually did prefer more open habitats where their fossilization potential was lower. In the same way that, like, elk tend to live out in, like, the grasslands more than they live in the forested areas.
Yes.
Whereas
Yes.
white-tailed deer with smaller head crests, or not crests, antlers, are living in forests. Caribou with really, really large antlers don't live in forested areas at all.
I have a counterpoint.
What's that?
Moose.
I mean,
Yeah.
they exist. Again, it's not a unilateral. They can't live there, but it's more like there is a correlation that is evident, even if not every species observes it.
I was also gonna. I don't want to nickel and dime you on this, but yeah.
But moose?
No,
Moose?
I was gonna
Question
say
mark?
the historical range of caribou goes a whole lot farther south than you would think. Like,
That's
there's a
true.
reason why we have them in the Forests of New England exhibit in the Harvard Museum, because historically they were here.
In any case, this doesn't really matter, but this is just what I was getting at. I remember when I was an undergrad reading that paper, and they had looked at, like, there were maybe like 15 or 20 specimens in the data set, and I saw they had like 3 or 4 Corythosaurs. And I remember my default reaction was like, why don't you, like, you were at the AMNH doing this research, why didn't you look at like all the dozens of Corythosaurus they must have? Or at the Tyrrell? Like, I just didn't understand. Right? I thought, like, I didn't understand that museums shared casts, and that even though they were mounted differently, like, often when you go to different museums, those are the same animal you're looking at. Like, you know, if you've been to a museum and seen a T-Rex, you probably saw a cast of either AMNH 5027 or Sioux or Stan, which is, you know, was a specimen owned by the Black Hills Institute that's now been acquired by the Museum of Abu Dhabi. Right? Those are like the 3 T-Rexes that get cast. If you ever saw Suchomimus, you saw the one specimen. Right?
If you ever saw this one, you saw the really, really good specimen of it.
Right. If you saw, what is it? God damn it. Carnotaurus, the other Belosaur, right? There's one
only
individual.
one.
Right.
Yes.
So I didn't understand when I was younger that those were like, you know, these amazingly rare individual fossils that are being cast and shared between places. I thought that every museum had done expeditions to these places and they'd all found these fossils, and I thought they were that common.
Yeah.
And so I knew that the museums put the best stuff on display, but I thought there were like warehouses full of these really complete specimens that were used for research.
Only
Right.
at the AMNH.
Well, but at the AMNH also, like, it's not like there's like 40 Corythosaurus back in storage that you
No,
can
no,
go
no,
look
no.
at with
It
the
was-
2 best
No.
ones on display.
Yes, I was just saying for like the AMNH is the only one where that could even like remotely apply.
Right. I think
Field
the
museum.
Tyrrell,
Oh, the
Tyrrell,
Tyrrell.
yeah.
yeah. The Tyrrell's the
Well-
only one where really on the dinosaur record, like, they will just have many individuals of everything because the dinosaur park formation is so abnormally rich. Amelia, what were you saying?
I was gonna say, like, having been there, like, that's what struck me about the Tyrrell Museum, or one of the things. It was that and the CMN too. Like,
Yeah.
the CMN, it was like you walk in and there's just rows and rows and rows of hadrosaurs and ceratopsians, like skulls, skeleton.
Right.
Like, it was awesome. It was so cool, and I'm not used to seeing that in American museums. Like, we don't have those kinds of deposits. Even the best Hell Creek collections don't have that kind of preservation or that, you know, that kind of sample size.
Yeah, I mean, Dinosaur Park is just a really special thing. Like, it's just an amazing, amazing deposit. What I'm trying to get at with this is that having this many individuals of Majungasaurus, which vary a lot in quality, right? We've referenced a few times that there's a really good specimen. That is, and I want to just make sure I get the number right here. FMNH, because it's in the Field Museum, PR 2278. That one is a mostly complete skeleton, including skull bones, vertebrae, and appendicular elements.
It's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. That's cast pretty much everywhere. Now, the good skull is a different specimen. The nearly complete skull that was, described in detail is FMNH PR 2100. And there's another specimen that's a skull and associated vertebrae. There's a picture on Wikipedia that you can see. We could probably flash it here. I think we'll be able to. It's FMNH PR 2836. In the image, it's not fully prepared. I don't know if it's since been prepped.
At the Field Museum.
I don't know if they're still there.
What do you mean?
I know they were at the time, but they may have gone back to Madagascar. Yeah, but I mean, like, again, we're talking about a wealth of material, but in terms of, like, animals with good skulls, 3.
Yeah.
Right? Like, dinosaurs don't have a large sample size. The available sample of any dinosaur species is probably 1. The greatest...
Allosaurus.
Well, I mean, but there are, like, maybe 10 examples, maybe 20, of dinosaurs where there's anything close to a sufficient sample size. There's, like, Psittacosaurus, Protoceratops, Triceratops, Centrosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus, Ionosaurus, Allosaurus. I'm sorry?
Edmontosaurus,
Allosaurus, Coelophysis, obviously, Limosaurus, Majungasaurus, and Gorgosaurus, Albertosaurus, and Tyrannosaurus.
I don't think Tyrannosaurus counts in that.
Well, I mean, there's like 50 of them. We haven't found a bone bed of them, but I mean, like, in terms of absolute number, there are more Tyrannosaurus than there are, like, Majungasaurus.
I would say in terms of number, not necessarily that they're the same quality, though. Like, I think about, like, all the duckbills are, like, a lot of them are very good, versus Tyrannosaurs, there's, like, maybe 10 that are good, and the rest kind of suck, even if they count towards the number.
Oh, Falcarius. I forget how many of those there are.
Well, Falcarius, there are probably hundreds of individuals.
Yeah,
but the problem is that they're disarticulated. And that might sound like a lot of animals, but if you're trying to do something where you want to look at, like, variation in any sense, you're limited to maybe, like, 24 species. You know, it's rare for there to be 2. The fact that we have so much of Majungasaurus makes it a really important animal. And it's one of the things that I find the most wonderful about it is that it's been really well documented to the degree that I think every paleontologist should aspire to with the animals that they name and describe. Like, Majungasaurus got a whole SVP memoir dedicated to it with, like, I think 6 constituent papers, and then has also had more papers on it since then.
You've said, like, almost every single bone of this animal has been CT scanned and uploaded. Like,
yeah. I mean, I've downloaded a Majungasaurus. You may say you wouldn't download a Majungasaurus, but I would, and I have.
You'll do it again,
and I'll do it again. It's really, really wonderful, and I think I can't emphasize. You know, I think we in the Skeleton Crew are all in favor of long-form anatomical description.
Yeah,
but I can't
videos too.
Long form.
We're fans of long form.
Right. That was my nickname in high school. I was called James Longform Napoli.
Longiformis.
No, you were.
No, I was not.
We're so focused. We're doing such a good job.
We're doing okay. The point I'm trying to make is that having these kinds of descriptive papers often strikes people as, like, a boring thing, right? Like, and I remember feeling this way when I was entering the field. I was like, I don't want to do descriptive anatomy. That sounds boring. I want to answer big questions. Well, a lot of science is just contributing data to work on problems, and anatomy requires description. Even in my work on tyrannosaurs, I find myself referencing to understand outgroup condition and everything. I reference papers on Majungasaurus all the time because they're the best example of really, really good long anatomical descriptions with a lot of detail and a lot of information that are available for more primitive theropod dinosaurs at all. And so I think for anybody aspiring to enter this field, if you're feeling like, you know, I don't want to do descriptive anatomy, I want to do something flashy with stats or something, you can do both. I do both. But what you cut your teeth on? Descriptive anatomy. And that is always the bedrock of what we do. And if you want to make any species into a reference species, just publish a good description of it, and you will see everybody start referencing it because they have to, because there's not really other stuff you could do that with.
Citations go burr.
They do. Well, not as much as I'd like. But eventually they'll go burr.
Eventually they'll go burr.
It's a long game.
More people need to reference Psittacosaurus amataba.
No.
So, James,
Yes.
you mentioned that this is a more primitive theropod dinosaur. Perhaps we should discuss what kind of theropod dinosaur this is.
Oh, indeed.
That sounds like phylogeny.
I think
Do I
it
get
is.
it back?
He shoots the phylogeny signal into the sky.
Is it mine again?
Go, Alex, go.
You can do it.
It's been taken from me so many times.
It's a poor, sickly child.
Sorry. This is our first ceratosaur, right?
Yes.
Exciting. So, dear viewer, we've talked about a lot of theropods on this channel. Some floofy,
do it again.
some big, but we haven't talked about ceratosaurs before. So I'm going to bring you back to the late Triassic, early Jurassic. Ooh. Are you excited? Good.
Very.
We have what we call avirostran theropods. So this is a pretty early node within the theropod tree. It emerged pretty early in theropod evolution. And this is the group that includes ceratosaurs and later avitheropods, so titanosaurs and stuff like that. So ceratosaurs evolved pretty early on. We have some in the early Jurassic, things like Eoabellosaurus 2, I think is in the middle Jurassic. And we'll talk about some of these earlier ceratosaurs in another video because we have one in the game. But the most diverse group of ceratosaurs, which are these very, not general, that's not fair, a very primitive theropod, relative to a lot of the other stuff we've discussed. More derived than something like Coelophysis, but certainly down the tree, are the abelisaurs. Now, there's a distinction to be made. There are abelisauroids, which is a group that contains a very interesting branch that I will mention briefly, probably now and later in the video, and the abelisaurians, so the family of abelisaurs. And so these are generally southern hemisphere, so Gondwanan, and we joked about this, I think, earlier in the video, but mid-sized predators. Early ones we have from the early Cretaceous, and I mean the proper early Cretaceous, so like the Actian, like Spectrovinator, are, I think, a few meters long, and then once we get into the middle and later Cretaceous, they become 7-8 meters long. There is, so yeah, like I said, they're mostly southern hemisphere. There is one from Europe currently, which is possible it snuck across from North Africa. We have North African species like Rugops, but there's kind of this big split. There's this one clade that we'll talk about in another video because a cool guy goes there. And then there's Majungasaurinae. So within the family of Belissaurids, there's Majungasaurinae. And Majungasaurians are pretty cool because they are from Madagascar and India. A lot of these abelisaurs, these large predator or these medium-sized predatory ceratosaurs, are from South America. But the Majungasaurians are not. They are Madagascar and India. And that's cool because at the beginning of the late Cretaceous, India and Madagascar split apart. So we would expect that they should have some shared, similar, but ultimately, by the time that Majungasaurus is around, Maastrictian, different fauna. So that's, a very brief summary of the whole clade. I didn't talk at all about Elaphrosaurians or Noasaurians, because James will break out in hives. But there's a group of ceratosaurs that appear to be more closely related to abelisaurs than they are to things like Ceratosaurus, that are characterized by having long limbs and reduced skulls that are smaller and in some cases appear to be edentulous, that also evolve in the Jurassic. These are things like Lemosaurus and Elaphrosaurus, and it appears that this group, in some form or another, because there's some controversy about phylogenetic position, kind of persists to the end of the Cretaceous, and some of them actually are also found in Madagascar. We'll talk about Majungasaurus. Maybe when we talk about the paleo environment, but yeah, so this is a really cool, diverse group, and honestly, I would love a Noasaur representation in here, because like it's a scale. They probably have like little filament, but if anything was going to be scaly and small, it would be Noasaurs.
Yeah, they're a really, really fascinating group, and I wish their fossil record was better. Like, they seem to be doing so much in parallel. And with the amount of lifespan they have, like, I just can't believe there are not more weird radiations of them that we don't know about yet.
Well, what? They would have to be.
No, what I'm saying is, like, I guess the better way to say that is we must just be scratching the surface of their diversity.
Sorry.
Like, and so I would love to know much more about them.
Well, yeah, they appear to be largely Gondwan and clade, right? So our sampling for the region is not as strong.
Right.
Yes, that is. I'll share a Jacquism with the group and with everyone, which is that if you look at the global distribution of where we find fossils, it is also a global distribution of where paleontologists are.
Weird.
Because
that's nothing to worry about.
No.
Because the science, paleontology, like all sciences, has history that's rooted in the, development of European colonization, and kind of where European academics seated themselves, and we still see that today. But things are improving, and they can only get better, I hope.
Yes, there's a lot of rock to prospect. It can only improve. If you want to know how bad the geographic sampling bias is, though, like, it's not only what countries you dig in, it's where you dig in those countries is highly biased by a lot of factors. And some of it's like what's accessible.
Yeah.
Right. This is something I was talking about recently with a colleague. The Depéret formation in North America, which is Campanian. It's roughly similar in age to Dinosaur Park. They're not exactly the same age, but like
it's very close though.
It's Campanian. It's late Cretaceous. It's got a wonderful fossil record.
Talk about some of those critters later too.
Well, we will. Yeah, I mean, Parasaurolophus comes from the Depéret, or several species of it too. The Pseudoceratops.
I think it's just one species. I think it's just Cytocristati.
I believe Tubicin may also be from one of the Depéret.
I thought that was the Kirtland. I thought that one was.
Oh well, you know what? Some people think they're the same animal. In which case,
okay.
Yes, but anyway, yeah. Parasaurolophus kyrtocristatus, the Pseudoceratops, the Tyrannosaur teratophonius, which appears to now be known from a bone bed that is actively understudied. So I can't wait to know more about that.
Oh, I thought you meant James. I thought you said it was actively understudied, and I'm like, how is something being actively under? Is there?
It's being
It's under study.
Yes,
and I'm not doing it. So, which you can tell I'm very not bitter about. The Depéret formation is in the most remote and difficult to access terrain in North America. This is a little piece of lore for the USGS, I guess. It was actually that basin was the last part of the continental United States to be geologically mapped because it's so hard to access. When we're able to dig there, and there are people who do their field programs there, Joe Sertich is somebody who's like made a career out of studying it. It's tough stuff to work in, right? The fossil record might be just as good as the Dinosaur Park formation. We can't go there that way. You have to get there. Whereas the Dinosaur Park formation is much more easily accessible, due to just geographic factors. And so it's both very rich and people can actually get to it, without much incident. This changes a lot. There was a study done recently, I believe in the invert paleo world, that showed that the trilobite fossil record is being dominated by signal from a couple of localities that are in quick proximity to a bar that invertebrate paleontologists like to go to. And so they're preferentially sampling.
Amazing.
And like apparently to I think a slightly problematic degree, because it's like there are a lot of other outcrops that nobody's looking at because these you can go to and then in 5 minutes get to the bar afterward.
I'd like to offer an alternate hypothesis, which is that they were known to be fossil-rich locations, and savvy business people in the region were like, "Oh, paleontologists are all drunks. We'll make some cash."
They were like the only people that actually got rich during the gold rush were the people who built all the stuff around
sold
it.
pickaxes.
I guess no, and James, I think this is a very good lesson because it's something we often mention kind of on the channel, which is like Lamau fossil record for, and then move past. But if you think about it, right, like there are successive filters to finding a fossil somewhere. If you just do like a map and you like, here's the country I want to look for fossils in. And you're like, okay, well, first you got to figure out what section of that country is exposed sedimentary rock. So that's your first filter, and then what of it is fossiliferous? That's your next filter. And then what's covered by plants or cities? That's your next filter. And then come the more fun secondary filters of like development, which is, has anyone built a road?
Right.
Because if it doesn't have plants or cities, there's a good chance it's a desert.
Mm-hmm.
So has anyone built a road that's even remotely close to it? Okay. And then the final filters are, will I be shot if I go there? And that could be, is it private property? Is it an active war zone? Is it anything? And so then you narrow it down to the place where you can go.
Right.
Also, yeah. And then if you're looking for dinosaurs, you have to add the additional filter of, is it between X and X million years old?
Yeah.
Right.
And is it terrestrial?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know. You could find like a floater.
Yeah, I mean, Carnotaurus was a floater.
True. I mean, I still
points, Scott.
I still firmly say I think that it's only a matter of time before we find out like marine dino. But
will we have? There are many penguins.
Yeah. And I think the point about geopolitics is I think one that's important as well. Like a lot of areas that we know are likely to yield a significant dinosaur fossil record have not really been accessible because of geopolitical events leading them to be unsafe to be in. And I can't repeat stories I've heard here, but there are,
I could repeat one. This one isn't a dinosaur one, but it was that I know that my dad had a funny interaction with Phil Gingrich, who's a paleontologist at the University of Michigan, did a lot of work on early whales and stuff like that, kind of like single-handedly wrote the book on whale evolution. And he had been working on Pakicetus and some stuff around there. And then my dad ran into him in the halls in, let's say, late 2001, early 2002, and was just like, hey, Phil, how's the work going? He's like, I'm in a bad mood. He was like, don't think you're going to be doing field work for a while, huh? He's like, no.
Right. But I have heard stories of crews having, not great things happen to them when they're working in areas of active unrest. This is not this is not an unfounded fear, right? Especially when you're out in remote areas. It is like, this is a reason that the fossil record of a lot of Central Asia took a long time to be fully sampled, is like during the period of this. Never mind, I'm not even going to talk about it. It's too complicated. But I mean, basically that the Soviet Union locked down access to a lot of things from Western researchers, but also wasn't supporting Mongolia. So it's not really that complicated, right? During the Cold War, the Iron Curtain prevented a lot of Western researchers from accessing or supporting field work in Central Asia, but the Soviet Union also wasn't really supporting things locally. And so, paleontologists in, say, Mongolia, which has a really rich fossil record, had to make do with very, very limited resources. And it's one of the reasons that, after the Iron Curtain fell, they immediately started reaching out to other institutions like the FMNH in particular, basically trying to get more foreign investment because they had been denied that so long. And that's what started the FMNH Gobi expeditions in the 90s. There's a part of the story not a lot of people know, but it was that the Mongolian Academy of Sciences reached out to the American Museum of Natural History, not the other way around. And they wanted to see if they could continue that historical partnership. Whatever. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, no, there was a point I wanted to make, but I just did remember it. I think it's also worth saying that geopolitical things often make fieldwork impossible, not necessarily because it's literally too unsafe to be in an area, but because institutions will not allow you to because of the insurance that would be required, or like the potential danger. And this is something I experienced because there was a point in the 2020s, the early 2020s, as we'll call them, as we approach 2024, where my institution, the AMNH, would not let me travel to do collections visits because of the COVID risk. This is before like vaccines were widely available or before they were incredibly widely implemented. And like even going to the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh for some research in the last year of my PhD, which was early, I guess this was late 2021, required a lot of paperwork and decision making to see, like on their part, to see if they would allow me to take the risk. And so if you think about like that level of bureaucracy for just that, what, Dalton?
The Majungasaurus is kind of clipped into the hill a little bit, but its leg tried to maintain its position on the ground, and so its leg like went above its body, and
Inverse
I've never seen
kinematics
that.
is a fun animation.
I love it. But anyway, that's just to say, if an area is an active war zone or undergoing any sort of political unrest, you can basically expect your university or museum will not allow you to go, even if you would otherwise be comfortable with going. There's all a way of saying there's a lot more to be discovered.
Yes, absolutely.
And as
A nice long.
But what can we say about this particular critter right here?
Oh, nothing at all.
Well, it's all been discovered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We discovered it all, Sam.
I give it no.
Well, what's left to say? Well, do
Well,
we want to
yeah.
perhaps work down the animal?
A little bit, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, let's start at like one of the characteristic features of abelisaurs, which is their head, in that they have very weird ones.
Yes.
Bulldog face.
They've squashed and squished it.
Squash, squish, very tall, very deep, and
Yes.
narrow, and
Yes, very
short.
narrow.
Very, like there's one picture of like it's become a meme like several times that theropod dinosaurs look really goofy from the front. We've made jokes about
They
it
do.
a couple times.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good
But-
too.
There is a couple reconstructions of Carnotaurus that show it from the front, and it is one of the most unsettling creatures I've ever seen. They have like hedge clippers for a face. They're so weird. Oh god, it's
Majungasaurus
gross.
actually has a fairly wide face for Nebulosaur, I think.
Yeah,
It looks
does.
Yeah.
reasonable.
Yeah.
I
This-
wouldn't
I mean,
say
and the model
reasonable,
looks-
but it looks
Among
Pretty good.
among other abelisaurs, it looks
it
reasonable.
looks less like a hatchet.
Yeah.
Yes.
God, they're so silly looking.
Um,
I'm looking at Carnotaurus
and
right
a
now.
lot of yeah, and as you also know with Carnotaurus, and well, hence its name, they also famously have a lot of cranial ornamentation. And Majungasaurus is no exception in that it has a goofy little short stubby horn right on the top of its head.
Does it have a rooster comb?
I like the rooster comb.
I don't.
It's kind of burned in my brain. I don't like it,
is.
but it's when I close my eyes and think,
Yeah.
When you close your eyes and see Majungasaurus.
I see the Jurassic Fight Club monster.
Oh, it's really gross. But this little horn, like, it is one of the few like horns that I've seen on dinosaurs where like I actively dislike it when people give it more keratin, like it probably
Well,
had.
actually,
Like,
it didn't. It didn't.
didn't?
I was reading this in the paper earlier. The quality of
thank
bone
God.
preservation in Majungasaurus is like second to none. This is another thing about the Myverano formation. I'm not sure the exact pronunciation, which I don't think we've explicitly talked about yet in the video.
No, not yet.
But the preservation quality is really, really good. I'm aware of undescribed stuff from there that is going to blow everyone's minds when it's published. But like one thing that we can talk about is there's a number of birds known from the Myverano formation. There's Rahunavis, there's Varuna,
Yes.
Falcata Caeli.
yeah.
Right, and so like preserving bird bones is tough,
Oh my god.
right?
Oh, let me look up really quick to see if I think that this is published. But I guess I'll say it here, and then I'll find out if it's published, and then we can cut it if not. But like speaking of like the quality of preservations on those bird bones, one of my good friends and fellow lab alums, Joe Gronke, he's a preparator, and he was working on some Malagasy material from, I believe, the same formation, and was working on a bird skull that was so finely preserved that no prep techniques could actually extract the fossils from the bone, from the matrix without damaging them. So it was entirely, as he called it, no-touch prepped, that was just using purely digital techniques to actually reconstruct the skull and everything. I believe that is actually published, because that was
That's
there's that one,
yeah.
and it was,
Yeah.
and he won the Lazadorf Paleo Art Award for it. If memory
Yeah,
serves.
I mean,
Cool.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean these.
stunning.
Yeah, go
well, what
ahead,
I'm
sorry.
just saying is like the preservational quality here. It's not only the amount of bone that's preserved; it's the quality of that bone, right? It reminds me of the goby. In some respects, I think
Yes, where you do also get
right.
nice
I mean,
birds.
you could argue it's probably better than the goby, in some capacities. You know, I mean, that's a big claim, but I'm aware of some things that I've never seen preserved in the goby that are preserved here. But in any case, we know enough about the surface texture to infer the skin, and they say, and I quote, or rather, the lack of horn. Also, I'm really getting distracted by the bear roar. It's the only thing I don't like about this. Is it's such a stock sound effect.
It is a bit.
The corneal process on the frontal, with its projecting tuberculate sculpture, was covered by thick dermis and potentially a small keratinized conical scute, but there's no evidence of a tall projecting horn. So they're like, it's probably just skin.
Okay.
It might be a big scale, but there's no anchoring structures that actually show a big horn.
That's interesting.
Thank God. Thank God. Because I've seen some reconstructions of it with a big ass unicorn horn, and it's uncomfy looking.
By the way, just so that H Bomber guy doesn't cancel our channel, that was a direct quote from Sampson and Whitmer, 2007. I did not create the text.
Good job. Don't wanna have to make an apology video and delete it 45 minutes later.
Yeah, the Skeleton Crew, soon to be featured on H Bomber Guy.
Oh no, no phrase strikes fear into my heart quite like that.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Dalton, I sent you something.
This skull is basically perfect.
I was gonna ask,
Basically,
do we think they just downloaded the CT scan and built it from that? Because it's like
it looks
uncanny.
Like
Oh yeah, have we mentioned how literally every bone of this animal is
We
available
have.
for download? Okay, good.
we
Except for
and
one
we
of
also did make a joke of you wouldn't download a Majungasaurus.
Because I
And-
can't.
Because I have.
Yeah.
It's on my
But-
external hard drive right now.
Like,
Yeah,
hang on,
so well, if it's so good, I do wonder if it has the correct number of teeth. Let's
count.
open it up side by side.
But
Let's
do you
take
have
a look.
games on your phone?
Engage pervert cam?
engaged.
Oh,
Oops. I hate that
Ooh,
that's a
Dutch
feature.
angle, it's evil.
Let's start with the premaxilla, and we'll move on from there.
not the right number of premax teeth, I don't think.
Ah, damn.
Well, hold on. Let's before we make that a sign.
There should be 4 on each side.
Looks like there's 3. Maybe.
Ooh. No,
1,
that's
2,
4.
3.
No, I think that one that you counted, Dalton, is on the other side.
Tricky.
1, 2, 3. Hang on.
Is that first one you're counting not over the midline on the other side of the skull?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
No, it's.
So this little thin pointy,
The median tooth.
Oh, okay.
I think that's 1, right?
the median premaxillary tooth.
Oh, yeah. I didn't
Okay,
see it in the
let's
thing.
do one side.
Yeah.
We're
Do the side of the sun. Hang on.
we're troubling and confusing ourselves. Ooh, and Dalton, are those temp sky in the background?
They might be.
They
I
are.
think those probably were around.
I think so.
That's an
They were.
appropriate.
They're in the Cretaceous.
Well, now
I think it has the
don't have
correct
that
number
on
of
the list yet.
teeth in the premaxilla.
I think. I'm sorry. Can you angle it from the front again? Like,
So-
try to get as flat anterior as you can.
Yeah, I agree, Dalton. I think like where the teeth become more recurved is the maxillary set, and I think it does
Yeah.
have 4.
Well, it's copying the skull in this paper that describes the skull in that the one on the left is like the biggest, and the middle one, like it looks very,
Oh my
very, very
god.
close.
Yeah, like I
They
think
might have just
I think they just downloaded the skull. Wow, they did
correct. Good.
Base
You did it.
paleo.
it. Yeah.
yeah, that's like. Because
Oh my
what I
god,
kept noticing
Amelia,
is
you're
they-
right.
Yeah, no, she's
Yeah,
absolutely
Yeah,
yeah.
holy shit.
Because
You act surprised that I am.
No, I mean,
correct.
I'm sorry. The holy shit wasn't that you're right. The holy shit is you're right about a ludicrous thing that I would never have guessed that they just downloaded the skull. Yeah.
Well, the thing that I don't know, they must have filled in the bottom teeth.
Yeah.
Because those don't line up very well. But also, it's missing a couple of them, and it would look super doofy. Not that it already doesn't look doofy, but
Right.
I wonder if
Fine.
they did just download the skull.
I know we're all very
insane.
impressed by this paleo accuracy, and I hate to undermine it by saying that Tempskaya is actually apparently not Maastrictian. It goes extinct in the Santonian. So
No.
let us know in the comments that we're very bad at science.
Now, this is the last video from the skeleton crew.
That's
Yeah.
it.
let
It's
it
over.
let it be known that I'd go for vibes-based botany, not accuracy-based botany.
No, solidarity. Let it be known that we all helped Dalton choose exactly which plants were in that enclosure.
Well, I
It's
mean,
all our fault.
vibes-based botany is lore
just
accurate
botany.
to. Well, it's lore accurate to Jurassic Park. So
Yeah.
This is true.
Now, in terms of the
So we've talked about
maxillary
the
teeth,
maxillary teeth.
there's not nearly enough.
No.
Yeah, it has a lot.
Yeah, 17 maxillary teeth is a lot for a
Pre-max.
theropod. That's the range you're only getting into with like Alioramus and Chinchasaurus.
Well, one of the things that's
I mean, among like big theropods at the very least.
Is that a primitive thing? Because Coelophysis also has a
Yeah,
messy
I think
teeth.
I think it's more plesiomorphic, and like Allosaurus and other Allosauroids, at the very least Acrocanthosaurus, which I've counted myself, they all tend to land in this 14 to 15 range, which is also typical for Tyrannosaurs. Dromaeosaurs have fewer, so I think it's just a general reduction.
It's an
Holy
it's an
shit.
interesting pattern that seems to hold true for reptiles in general, like in squamates. Like I'm thinking about mosasaurs. It's the same thing. The basal ones have many more teeth than the derived ones. Like you start out with the exception of halosaurs because they're weird and dumb and don't play by the rules. But like basal mosasaur, like Cladastes, you can have up to 17, 18 in the denary, and then
Wow.
by the time you hit Mosasaurus, it's down to like 12.
I'm
Or
looking
they,
at
I think
Coelophysis.
Mosasaurus stops at 13. The Platycarpines go all the way down to 12, and I think there's one or two Prognathodon that are 12 or 11.
I'm looking at Coelophysis right now. I think it's got like in the ballpark of 24 or 25 maxillary.
They're a
Yeah,
lot.
no. So I do think it's a primitive
That's a
thing,
lot.
but
Yeah.
this is a lot for
Mhm.
four more derived theropods. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And I want to just
Ceratosaurus
clarify to any
is that
viewers:
many.
17 on one side of the face, not between
Yeah.
both maxillae.
I wouldn't.
Well-
No, because Ceratosaurus doesn't. Sorry, yeah.
No, I was just. I wouldn't be surprised if like reducing the teeth is just a consequence of how they like of some underlying thing for the like model and the rig or whatever. Just it also may have looked kind of ludicrous if they put a ton of smaller teeth in.
Well, yeah,
Which correct, but yes.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I want to say about the teeth specifically is that it didn't just have a lot of teeth exposed. It also just made a lot of teeth. That these guys, according to Evolution of High Tooth Replacement Rates in Theropod Dinosaurs by Michael D.
Demick. Yeah, Michael Demick. Yeah.
Demick? Yeah. Michael Demick et al. These guys were replacing their teeths all the time. Like to the tune of double the rate that we see in other theropods. That for reference, they use Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus in the paper and show that they were replacing their teeth north of 100 days. Like each individual tooth had about 100-day lifespan, and Majungasaurus was at 56. So these guys were churning out teeth.
Were they eating rocks? Like, are they stupid?
I
This
mean, look at
looks
him.
like an animal that
Is he stupid? Yes.
Rocks.
yes. It's just that's why they have such a long sausage-shaped body. It's full of rocks.
They are so. I mean, like, listen. In terms of functional anatomy,
Sausage
not to
is
turn our attention to the legs, but these things have really short legs for their
Yeah.
body size.
They're built. They're built like
I
terriers.
remember the yeah.
Like-
They are. The first time I saw the mounted skeleton was at Stony Brook. I did my master's there, and I had to do like some sort of administrative thing. So I had to go to the admin building for the first time, where unbeknownst to me, there is a full-sized mounted Majungasaurus, which is not that big because Majungasaurus isn't that big.
Yeah.
And like it's going on forever, and it's like 4.5 feet tall.
Yeah,
It's perfectly balanced. Put a Majungasaurus.
Yeah,
on
you
it.
cannot knock this
James
animal
can
over.
even look over the
Right.
top of it. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. This is a dinosaur that needs to look up to look me in the eyes. It's just
I remember
It's not that
when
short.
I remember when I when like I've given people tours around Michigan's new exhibits, and people have looked at the Majungasaurus and gone like, "Wow, that thing's big." I was just like, "Nah, look at the pedestal it's on. It's taller than you." Like,
yeah. No, it's not big, and they've got
But,
these
like-
short, stumpy legs with proportions that are really bad for moving quickly. Like they don't look right.
they're built like mustelids. These things are like weasels. It's a weasel theropod.
I would disagree
Was
that
it?
they don't look right, because to me it does it doesn't look. It's not pleasing to look at, but it doesn't jive as not right, if that makes sense. Like it does look balanced. It doesn't look like it's gonna tip over, and it doesn't have the same like horrible energy that like oviraptors and things like that do, where it's like it doesn't look right and I don't like it. This is like okay, it's a seesaw, okay.
It just doesn't look like other theropods. Like in terms of the scale of the legs. Although I think Ceratosaurus is not far off, and if reconstructions of Spinosaurus are correct, maybe this is more what plesiomorphic theropods look like than we like to think it does, or than we like to think it is.
You might
Long.
not like it, but this is what people.
Zallosaurus, as far as its trunk goes, is actually pretty.
Yeah. By the time you get up to like Allosaurs and especially Coelurosaurs, it's a fundamentally different body plan. But like, this makes me uncomfy, especially given all of the suggestions that Carnotaurus was the dinosaur speed demon. Which, spoiler alert,
We'll talk about that.
we're going to talk about it for a while, so you might be able to surmise from that whether we think it's correct or not.
One of the few times they tried to reference real paleontological hypotheses for the behavior of an animal in one of the Jurassic shows, because they talked about it in Camp Cretaceous.
Oh, hey, you know what's cool about Carnotaurus? Do you know what we don't have?
The lower
We
legs.
don't
right?
have its basically any of its tibia or its feet at all.
Yeah, we have.
So maybe it looked like this. Maybe it was.
I don't like
It's
that.
still just as fast. It just has tiny little
It's wrong.
legs.
It makes
Yeah.
the sound. Yeah, that one.
The Mr. Crab walking noise.
It's interesting, Scott, that you say they look like weasels.
Yeah.
Because in prehistoric planet, the Majungasaurus is depicted as kind of like, or is it the Majungasaurus? I can't remember, but one of them
Neither
like
is-
It's the
trying to pull something out of
Majungasaurus.
its burrow.
The Majungasaurus is trying. Oh yeah, it's the Majungasaurus is trying to get the Sinosaucus, which is in a burrow, and then they have a little bit of a bait and switch with the Majungasaurus, like thinking that it's going to go in the burrow of that little mammal thing, and then it just gets one
Snake.
shot by the snake.
But man, maybe they could pull. I don't think they were adapting to. That's not what I'm saying. That's why the arms are small, so they can go into gigantic burrows.
They dig with their cornified heads.
Maybe.
Oh,
That's a raw.
brief tangent. I introduced Jacob to amphisbaenids
Oh
today.
God.
Yeah.
They're normal. What's wrong? They're just guys.
This is like the anti-IPs.
Well, okay, so I guess we've moved down to the arms, and I guess the arms are, besides the tooth count, which nobody cares about but us, the most inaccurate part of this
Yeah.
design, in that it has elbows and can bend them. That I've heard described before some of the advanced Abelisaurs, like this guy and Carnotaurus, as described as in a permanent Naruto run, and that's
Yep.
just correct. Like it is kind of funny that like you'll see some early reconstructions of like Majungasaurus, and it looks like this, where it's like they're very, very, very small arms, but they're still like tiny little, like moving forward like that. And then we find more of it, and it's just like, oh, these guys had like hints of wrists. These are like, it always gets talked about of just like, oh man, maybe Tyrannosaur arms were vestigial or something like that. No, this is a vestigial theropod arm. It couldn't wiggle its fingers. It couldn't do anything.
It's so funny. There's a paper on the myology, the muscle structure of the arm in Majunga, and it's one of the most ridiculous images I've seen in a hot minute. Like it's just
It's
like
so funny.
massive shoulder, like French fry arm.
Yeah, and like,
Oh, I wonder why those shoulder blades were so big.
so we had a humerus of the really good specimen 2278. And so it was reconstructed like this, as Scott said. The radius and ulna are like a quarter the length of the humerus, and I think they're just barely longer than the fingers. Although we don't have the entire finger, so it's possible
I don't think they're longer
well,
than
we
the
don't
fingers,
have we don't have
actually.
any entire finger. But yeah,
Okay.
no, I mean,
I didn't realize upon first looking at this image that those were the radius and the ulna. I thought they were totally
Yep,
separate.
no, those are the radius and the ulna.
They're just
It's
nightmarish.
like you have your humerus,
So-
right? And now you have your hand and your forearm, and you just whoop like that, just smash it all back into itself.
It's like crumpling a can, you
Yeah,
know, like
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, maybe this is a regional thing where there would be a thing in the garage where you take the beer cans and you smush it, and
Yeah.
there's a bucket.
This is a regional thing. We didn't have
This is a regional thing.
No,
I've never
this
heard
is-
of this.
I don't think it's a regional thing. It's just a scattered
A beer
thing.
drinker household thing.
Because I've seen
Well,
them. I think I had an uncle that had one.
In Michigan, it's one of those things of you can't get a deposit on your can back unless you return it intact, so it can scan it and give you 10 cents
Oh.
per can. So
Mhm.
I see. That's interesting.
That is interesting.
I wonder if can laws affect the distribution of can crushers in basements and garages.
And you know, just on the short armed thing, the arms, they're short, they're funky, and they appear to get short and funky pretty early in the clade's evolution. So the fossil record, as discussed earlier, for this group's not great. There aren't a lot of organisms that have really complete material. We have some Majungasaurians, we have some Carnotaurians, and kind of scattered throughout. Eoabellosaurus has shorter forearms. They're kind of, they're short, but they're not like Carnotaurian short. But the Noasaurians, the leggy, runny, long, weird, sometimes toothless ones, also have very, very short forearms. So there's not like an obvious ecological correlate. Why? I don't know.
Yeah,
I have a thought.
Someone tell me.
I have a just so story for it.
Do it.
My just so story is as follows, which is that if I'm thinking of Noasaurians, historically thought of as, quote, kind of like ornithomimosaur mimics a little bit. They get long and leggy and toothless. But ornithomimosaurs have humongous arms. But you know what ornithomimosaurs have that
Terrible
ornithomimosaurs have that Noasaurs might not have had are like big arm feathers. And perhaps like adapting it to a display / possible minor locomotion / brooding implement precludes otherwise like reducing the arms.
Well, right, and like that's so in my read of this situation, because it's like different in different groups of dinosaurs and different groups of animals in which the arms get short. Like they're getting short in different ways, and they seem to be getting short for different reasons. And with Abellosaurs, when I see this horrible nub that is like formless and horrible, it seems to be getting short in the vestigial way, in the way that like whales' hind legs get short, or like snake hind limbs get short. Or that they're the ones that still have them, like they're still stumpy and they kind of use them. If you didn't know that, look it up. It's weird. But anyways, like these look like vestigial structures to me. There's no obvious function or use, and that's why they're weird. That's why they're kind of stuck in a certain position.
yeah.
Versus like you brought up a really good point with the ornithomimosaurs, that they were putting feathers on there probably, and those feathers could have multiple functions. And like the way evolution works, if there's no pressure to use a structure, there's no pressure keeping it around. So what I mean by pressure is if there's no benefit to reproduction, to a structure being the way it is, it opens it up for variation. And sometimes that variation is it just gets lost because there's no benefit to maintaining the structure.
I just had a thought.
Yeah.
Building off of Dalton, I like what you're saying, right? Like ceratosaurs, weird, they have long arms. But what if the difference is if you are going zoom forward, right?
Mhm.
If your job is zoom, gotta go. Ornithomimosaurs could probably, to some degree, fold their arm against the side of their body,
Yeah.
basically pulling it out of the running profile. Where like if you were like a noasaur, you're like, I just gotta
So
make
it is
short.
literally a Naruto run. They are doing it for speed.
Yeah.
Like, like they can't do like an ostrich where they like just pull them back. They're like,
They genuinely.
we gotta get rid of them.
The kids on the
an
playground are
evolution.
right.
It's an evolutionary Naruto run. That one guy who tried to invade Area 51 was on the right track.
I just want to say we've circled back around into Carnotaurus is in fact built for speed.
I don't think we're going to stay there. We're going to circle back out of there.
No.
But one thing that I want to add to this is there is a general I think the idea of a correlation with pennaceous feathering is interesting, although I think we'd have to contend with Alvarezsaurs for that. Now in Alvarezsaurs, the arm is clearly being specialized into a different kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that might Dalton, I think your idea is reasonable. It could possibly hold up to scrutiny. But I think Alvarezsaurs, I don't think they counter-argue it because they're not losing the arm. They're adapting it into a very, very specialized implement. The thing that I want to bring up here is Tyrannosaurs, because that's the group that is so traditionally known for having small arms. Their arms are not vestigial. Right. Demonstrably so. They have well-developed muscle attachments. They retain them. The fingers have well-developed condyles. All of the phalanges are free to move that are retained. Right. Which obviously the lost finger is not able to move, but every phalanx that is still there is completely well-developed in the exact same way it would be in a more primitive theropod. What were you saying, Scott?
I was going to say that they're well muscled, but they're I've heard some people almost overinflate how muscled they are, or at least proportionally, because I've heard the number get thrown around of T-Rex could curl 400 pounds with each arm, and it's oh my god, they were really, really strong. Well, one, no, they couldn't. And two, it was oh my god, they were really, really strong. I was remember, this is an 8-ton animal. That's not that much in comparison to the rest of its body weight. That's small. But they were
clearly still functional, and right.
Yes. Oh, they were doing something.
Now, had the group not been cut short by the asteroid, is it possible that they would have become vestigial? Maybe. Right. It is hard to imagine what an animal like T-Rex is doing with its small arms, but it is clearly doing something with them. It's doing its best, unlike Abelosaurs, where the arms are so short. And Amelia, you seem to want to say something, so I'll let you go before I continue.
I've got two things. Yeah. I've got two things. One, with Tyrannosaurs, one of the things that's been proposed is if it's part of the mating ritual, if they're grabbing each other or whatever they're doing with it, that's an example of, I mentioned earlier, pressure to keep it around. If it helps you have babies, it'll stick around, whatever the feature is. If that is the case, that would make sense. The other thing I wanted to mention is just a wild thought out of left field, because I have the messenger window pulled up to the side of our recording studio, so the arm is just haunting me in the corner. But I've been looking at it and I've been thinking about how does this happen? I'm also thinking, how do structures become vestigial developmentally, especially limbs? And I wonder, and this might be a stupid idea, but I don't know, could this be the sequence in which parts of a limb become vestigial? Because I'm thinking about whales and things. The last thing to go is the hip and the proximal elements, right? For those of you who don't know, my first actual science research was not on paleontology at all. I worked in a gecko lab doing embryology and limb development in geckos. And the way that limb development in amniote vertebrates works, frogs do it differently, which is bizarre, and I didn't like learning that. But anyways, normal animals, respectable animals, when they grow limbs, basically what happens is you have the three structures of the limb, the it's stylopod, zeugopod,
Yes.
autopod. So humerus. That's why like all tetrapods, all things with legs, have, and Tiktaalik. You go all the way back to Tiktaalik. There's the same structure of one bone, two bone, lots of bones. It's that 3-part structure. And the way the way development works is basically you have centers of signaling, and the cascading effect of these chemical and hormonal signals as they move across the body and become more diffuse or interact with other signals, and the intersection of these different levels of diffusion and concentration of the signals is like how you pattern an embryo. It's really cool. And I could go into hyperspace about it, but I won't. But basically, to jump ahead here, what I wonder about with this limb reduction thing is if developmentally, if what's happening is just a weakening of that signal, or of that center of the signals forming. Because if it's less signal for forming the limb is being sent out, if it's working, and that's why it's working distal to proximal, or out to in the turn. Like looking at the Majunga limb in front of me, the toes are the smallest. The zeugopod is the next smallest. The stylopod, the humerus, is still relatively there.
Yes. So I think the short answer is I think you're probably fundamentally right. I don't know if we know exactly whether it is a weakening of the signaling that gets cascaded down the limb. But what we do know.
But it's like you're not gonna be missing the humerus and have the rest of it.
I mean that's developmentally impossible.
Yeah. Among theropods.
Among at least what I've studied, right, is like
okay.
When you are reducing the limb, generally speaking, there's a general tendency to lose things from distal to proximal in terms of reduction or full loss, and from the lateral, or I'm sorry, I guess it's actually the medial side of the hand to the lateral side of the hand. Yeah. So you lose, like if you're losing a phalanx or you're reducing them, you're going to reduce the terminal ones first, and you're going to preferentially reduce the 5th and 4th digits before you lose the other ones. And there's a lot of literature on this from the origin of birds because of the developmental frame shift idea, and the various incongruities in the avian hand that we don't have time to get into right now.
There's a lot of direct developmental evidence for this too, in like squamates and like
and that's
gene experiments in mammals.
And that's like with avian limb development, if you're interested in that, and like what I mean by like these centers of signaling, the reason for the digit reduction, right, is I'm bad developmental biologist right now. I'm forgetting the name of it, but there's a name for that part of the tissue on the developing limb paddle that is like the center of signaling and the cascading effect of the patterning. You know what I mean?
The ZPA.
Yes. Zone of polarizing activity. Polarizing having to do with the difference in the levels of the concentration of Sonic Hedgehog, as well as other, important signaling factors.
Like Eggman.
They're called right. But yeah, so you can continue, but like the pieces were coming back together.
And so Roger Benson.
I didn't finish. So bird limbs, because I'm thinking about the mirrored chicken wings, and that's why the mirrored chicken wings are the way they are. It's like if you duplicate the ZPA right next to each other, that's why you get the mirror around those centers, because you've got the different zones of polarization, so the gradient of the signaling is going
right. And so that's getting to an interesting point, which is that a lot of this is not like a lot of the way we understand development right now, I think, put into very broad terms, is that it seems that I think there was an old idea that you just had genes for things. So you had like the hand gene or the finger genes, and the genes controlled how those things developed. A lot of how development actually seems to work is that you're basically telling tissue of the body, you're the third finger. And then the third finger is like, got it, boss, and makes the third finger. And that's wild, by the way. I think it's really annoying that you can just tell a patch of cells, you're an ear. And the patch of cells says, I understand what you mean, thank you. And immediately
and then just
it does it.
But development is so cool.
A lot of the structural variation is timing and expression level versus which is
and this is
what Amelia's
exactly what I was working on in the Gecko lab with the limbs. It had to do with timing, constant duration. It was like timing, duration.
Right, and that's how you pattern an animal. What I was going to say is what I'm not sure of, and I'm not saying I'm not sure because I think it's wrong. I just don't know if we know this. talking about the zone of patterning activity. Is that what it? Polarization.
Polarizing.
Right. That is telling, essentially, like, to put it in layman's terms, right? That's telling the hand what side the thumb is on. Right. So what you said is if you duplicate that and you put one on the other side, you'll make two thumbs. Or you'll mirror the hand.
And there's and you'll mirror it if you put it on opposite sides, but you can also duplicate it next to each other, and that's where you get the like that, because then it goes whoop.
Because what I don't know is if that is directly causally related to what happens when you reduce or lose a digit. Like, because I know that that's implicated in some way, because if you've got that localized in one area, you're getting less signal as you go further afield in the hand.
At the opposite
I
end,
don't know if that is necessarily correlated with the with what actually happens when you're losing the digit entirely. Like, is it that you're weakening things there, or are there other hormonal or molecular signals that are causing that to fail to develop? Both. Right.
It's very complicated because there are also signals that can cancel out the other. Like, this is when I remember from the class I took, like, we had to draw little diagrams of, like, a lot of this has been studied in fruit fly embryos because they're cylindrical. They're very easy to like imagine, like, the sides and the direction that these genes, or not the genes, that the direction of the signals that are initiated by the genes, I guess, or being read from the genes to build the thing. And then, so something to remember about all of this too is we've been talking about this for a while, and it's just the hand, just the autopod, and there's all these other factors going into it. Because, like, backing up before that in development, the first thing that has to happen is you have to segment the body. And that's what's telling the body, like, where do you put the legs? Where do you put the hands? Where do you put each vertebra? You know, it's wild. It's
I'm sorry,
so cool.
I just broke my watch.
Oh! I was like, what was that bang?
James,
No,
sorry.
that's okay.
Also,
I just
Alex,
grabbed
what?
the link wrong and it did the wrong thing. Please continue.
I was sidetracked by a joke that wasn't even right. I was going to ask if you've entered the Time Force, and I remembered that wasn't the line. Never mind.
James, I'm not sorry about your watch. Well, I am, but that's not why.
Oh,
I
why
was
are you sorry?
No, Alex, what?
I'm sorry because you have accidentally stumbled into what we call the Limosaurus zone.
Oh no! But wait, can I finish saying what I was going to say before?
Yeah, sorry.
Can I quickly ask Alex, why were you trying to get my attention there for a second?
You were looking very sheepish. I thought you had broken something and made a loud noise before. James.
Oh no, it was just I was like, what was that noise?
This one looks like ground hamburger. I don't like it. Dalton, find another one. I don't. I was liking this animal until
So what I was going to say is that Roger Benson was actually an author on a paper recently that did show that there is greater variability in the distal limb segments than the proximal ones, which gets to this, idea that as you're forming the limb and as you're condensing things, you're increasing variability as you go later. It speaks to this model that you're suggesting of, as you're sending out these signaling centers from the proximal to the distal limb segment, right? The weakening of that signaling could be responsible for the reduction of those distal limb segments. What is interesting, and what I wanted to bring up, is that this is widespread in theropods. Forelimb reduction is not just a Abelosaurus tyrannosaurus thing. Obviously, Noasaurus do it too, and Alex is, I think, going to torture me and talk about Limosaurus for a little while. But there's also a trend toward forelimb reduction in Allosaurs. There's a trend toward forelimb reduction in Alvarezsaurs. Wouldn't be surprised if there's more trends in forelimb reduction in Silurosaurs as well. So this seems to be whatever's going on, which I think, Amelia, you're probably right. I think that's probably fundamentally what's happening. This is an achievement that theropods unlock multiple times. Is this like, congratulations, you are losing your arms now. We'll be taking these, they say.
I mean, that's a really, really, really weird trend for them to do, because they were incredibly dangerous animals, yet they all seem to be unarmed.
Right.
I wonder. I'm not going to entertain
I'm
that.
not
That was a dumb joke. I wonder if it has to do with bipedalism, because, like, thinking about mammals, there's not any bipedal mammals, so it's not like besides
I was about to say there's
basically,
one.
right?
There's a couple of them. 5 of them are on this show.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Us and kangaroos, really. Right.
I'm aware. But right. Well, I'm thinking
Well,
about
right, they're-
kangaroos. Their arms aren't very long. I wonder if this is just a broader trend of bipedalism. And like flightless birds, arms are short.
Right.
Like, I wonder if that's part of what's going
Right.
on.
There's probably limited functional uses. Right.
Yeah. The last thing I'm thinking about again with respect to like the signaling center and what it would be, which is something that I'm sure is known, and I just don't know right now because I was focused on the limb specifically. But like, I wonder if part of it too is this change in concentration of the signals from like the Hox genes, like so from those segments originally. Because also thinking back to Tiktaalik, like thinking about the pattern in which limbs first evolved, you got the humerus first, the radius and ulna second, and digits were last. Like, I just wonder, like this direction of proximal to distal seems to be pretty conserved. And if you think about the ancestral vertebrate, it was a tube. Like, you take the tube and elaborate on it. Which they did not refuse to do. They certainly did. Vertebrates are very diverse, obviously. That was kind of a failed joke.
It's okay.
It doesn't matter.
It's fine. Everybody on YouTube gets to
I
see it.
laughed.
Yay! It's fine. Anyways, development is very
Yeah.
cool. And very fundamental to, I think, in my opinion, it is very important for understanding paleo. Because of how, as we talked about earlier, how incomplete the fossil record really is, development is kind of like a window that we can use to understand things that are incomplete, using like these rules by which all animals operate. Developmentally, things like amniotes are all kind of playing by the same rules, which I mentioned earlier with frogs. It's like as you move out of that, things work a little differently, but not really with invertebrates, at least. And even, as I said before, a lot of what we understand about development comes from fruit flies. So, like, these are rules that animal life has played by for a very long time. They're super conserved. And, part of that is if the animal cannot grow and be formed, it cannot reproduce. So, again, working back to how evolution works. That's why, critical functions, critical steps in development have to go a certain way. And yeah.
Well, if you're interested in the convergence of paleontology and developmental biology, have you heard of the Yale University? Where that is something many people in our lab do. That's not a dig. That's just a cool thing for viewers to check out the work of Yale people.
And speaking of Yale people, I never knew that before starting at the AMNH. I didn't know that Anjan did paleo. I knew him from gecko embryology papers.
That's funny. Oh yeah, it's a cool thing in our lab that I don't really do a lot of because I have so much to do. Really, when I say a lot of, I mean anything. I look at some cool things Zach shows me where I'm like, that's neat.
Yeah.
That helps us understand croc ballots. No, and I'm not going to labor on this, but I would like to briefly say that when Limosaurus was originally described, the super crazy thing about it, right, that it is an animal that loses its teeth and becomes edentulous as an adult, was not really the first big major point of interest and ultimately controversy. It was that it was capturing the avian frame shift in its hand and what was called a bilateral digit reduction, that it was reducing the hand inward. There was a paper published about it. However, and for people who aren't aware, this was on the way to birds. So in early theropod dinosaurs, the digit homology is 1, 2, 3, and in birds, it's 2, 3, 4. So the question is, how do you get from this to this? And one of the hypotheses is that there is as we were talking about earlier, there's not a gene for something. There's, something is an expression that is telling tissue that you are going to be this. So the idea is you're taking this and you're shifting that expression to tell those primordial tissues that, you are 1, 2, and 3, but now you're expressed in 2,
right,
3,
in the
4.
positions that used to be 2, 3, and 4. Right.
In the positions, yes, exactly. So it was proposed that maybe this ceratosaur was showing the shift, because ceratosaurs have usually 4 digits. The remains of the 4th and then Tetnurans have a clearly three-fingered hand. However, later studies came out, and there was a lot of debate about this, but what I think is likely the explanation, and I think this is discussed in the papers, is that the weirdness is just like, is the result of making your arm so short. Is that when you're reducing the arm, because it's like in the other Nomosaurians, in which the humerus, and then it's like the super short radius nola, and then like the hand's just getting squished in there, that you're bound to make something funky.
Right.
All right. I don't want to.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's an interesting story, and I think development is, I think, often underemphasized in modern paleo curricula. It shouldn't be. It's important.
While we're talking about hands, and we mentioned that Abylosaurs and Ceratosaurs in general maintain having four digits on the hand, you can see that this model does in fact reflect that. It has 4 digits. And if you look at the skeleton of Majungasaurus, it has 4 little dinky fingers. I mean, if anything, they made the fingers not dinky enough on this.
Oh, absolutely, they did. Although, I was gonna say, and I believe that Majungasaurus and the Abylosaurs more broadly lose the unguals, but I could be mistaken. That does sound right.
And so they probably shouldn't have
Alex,
claws.
you are not on screen. I will say.
Oh, I thought we were taking a break.
No,
we're using this break.
Oh, sorry.
That's why I'm making this point now.
Oops.
Do we know this is eliciting a cursed idea? Do we know that we could see the fingers?
I think people have proposed in the past that they were in
Did
a
they
paddle.
have little skink flaps? Oh, gross.
That'd be great.
That'd be horrible.
I will also say that, with you pointing it out, Dalton, and drawing comparisons to the real one, is that it does seem like, even if the fingers are a bit too long, they have the right pattern of length for them, which is neat. Because I think Carnotaurus has kind of a weird pattern where like it's like first digit is like really weirdly long or something like that.
In the game or in real life?
No, in real life.
I
want to see if I can find it. Let me see. Yeah, I think it's. No, it's never mind. I thought it had one long, like, claw on one of its digits, and that was it. Like, it had a a lot of reconstructions have it where I believe its digit 1 is really like long and pokey.
From what I can see of this image of the fossil, which I don't know that I fully trust, I'll be frank, but it looks like digit 4 in Carnotaurus is kind of enlarged.
Okay.
As like a big spike, right?
But I don't know if it has a big spike, but it's just bigger than it's bigger than the other fingers, and it seems to kind of come off at a different angle. And the drawing almost makes it look like the two phalanges have been fused, although it may just be a bad scan or something. I wouldn't put.
It's something that like I'll throw this in chat. Like, here's a Gabriel Lugetto like reconstruction of Carnotaurus, which I'm not using as a science thing, but it has the little like spike on it, and I thought that was based on something.
I'm sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, I think that's just its 4th finger, Scott. That it does seem to kind of come off at a different angle, unlike Majungasaurus.
All right, weird.
So, Scott, the cannibalism.
Yes, indeed. So, the big elephant in the room that I bet many of you have been wondering about, frothing at the mouth, watching this hour-plus video, waiting for us to get to, is the fact that the big thing that is very frequently cited about Majungasaurus is this is the cannibal dinosaur. Especially after a lot of this, stuff with Coelophysis was kind of thrown into question, and at least until, like, last week, when an Albertosaurus was published, showing some pretty solid evidence of at least some very, very unwelcome tooth-to-pelvis contact that was happening in some regard.
Youchers.
Listen,
Youchers, indeed.
You could have phrased that so much better. That was horrible.
Does this animal... So you're saying Majungasaurus had deeply homoerotic relationships with each other? Like Will Graham?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You said Hannibal, right?
Yes.
That's a little joke.
So, well, the reason why I said it that way is because Alex actuallys me every single time I say that, or every time we say that it was like, oh, is cannibalism in Albertosaurus? They're like, oh, probably. So
Yeah.
So I was being as broad
I
as
wasn't gonna
possible.
dig you for that.
But yeah. So the evidence for cannibalism in Majungasaurus is deserved for it being the cannibal dinosaur. Now, as we've said on the show before, just because it's like, oh, Majungasaurus was the cannibal dinosaur, that doesn't mean it was doing it all the time, and that also doesn't mean that other dinosaurs weren't doing it. It's probably a common thing among other dinosaurs. This probably happened all the time, even among dinosaurs you wouldn't expect. I bet hadrosaurs cannibalized.
Cannibalism among my dinosaurs?
It's more likely than you think.
More likely than you think.
That in Jurassic Fight Club, it was like they have to eat each other because there's not enough food on this small island of
Yeah, they phrased it as like, this is something that these... They also, I believe in Jurassic Fight Club, like, talked about, like, the head ornamentation and their weird short faces and short arms as, like, deformities from inbreeding from being stuck on a tiny island. Like, if memory serves, like, it's like... They're phrasing it as, like, this is, like, a football-sized island in which these, like, couple of horrible, deformed dinosaurs are beating the shit out of each other and eating each other and reproducing and making more and more deformed French bulldog-ass
I was gonna
dinosaurs.
say, basically a French bulldog.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
not,
like...
not, you know...
Only
not a
slightly
landmass.
less cannibalistic than French bulldogs, but, no,
Not
but...
landmass, like the fifth of the size of India. You know,
yeah,
tiny.
seriously. Madagascar is huge.
Yeah, it's enormous. It's such a... That show sucks so much. I love it. I love it deeply. I have the entire thing on DVD in my childhood home where I'm returning to tomorrow. But my God, like some of these things are real
it's
questionable.
so bad. But so
that's
yeah,
generous.
yeah. That's fair.
But the evidence for cannibalism in Majungasaurus is substantial. In that this is not something that we just see on a single individual. There are multiple individuals that have teeth marks that are the size and shape of ones that match up with Majungasaurus skulls.
Well, actually,
It
what's interesting,
is-
and I just want to bring this up, because you're a little...
Oh, please.
that was not quite correct. What they match are the tooth marks on sauropod remains, also known as the Majungatholus formation. So I don't think... Because it's hard to match up the teeth and jaws to these bite marks, especially because you can have multiple biting events. But what they're saying is, like, we're finding the same kind of tooth marks on Majungasaurus that we find on sauropods, so, like, presumably they're all just from Majungasaurus. Unless there's something bigger.
Yes.
Always a bigger fish,
Which
as they
some
say.
parts
Bigger than a
would
4 foot
suggest.
tall animal?
Right.
Oh,
There's this unseen
think-
ghost that just kills all of the dinosaurs in Madagascar and eats them.
I mean, the upper estimates for Majungasaurus are like 8 meters based on some fragmentary stuff. It's not small. It's a bit.
Yeah.
The
It's a
sauropods
lo-
also
it-
aren't like
But
giant.
it's a long animal more than it's a big
Yeah.
animal. But
But I mean, and this is I'm gonna be a hypocrite for saying it, but like I don't know. We found a lot of Majungasaurus and literally nothing else. So I could be convinced it's probably Majungasaurus that's doing.
Oh, I could too. I'm not trying to say it's wrong. I'm just saying, like, that's the line of evidence.
Sure.
And I think with a lot of... This is just my general plea to anybody who's popularly interested in paleo. If you are thinking about these sound bites that you hear as facts often, it is often very instructive to try to see what the actual line of evidence is to claim that. Because sometimes there are errors in the chain of logical reasoning. I'm not saying there is right now,
Sure.
but sometimes there are. And they often get stated in ways that are kind of misleading.
Just
Just sometimes, right? There's, right.
Nothing's-
Everything's real.
nothing's permitted.
There's no mistakes. Anyway, I'm sorry, Scott. Please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you so much.
no. I mean that's like it's essentially one of the things that Majungasaurus is most known for, and Unlike the Deinonychus, as I guess we've kind of stated here, unlike the Deinonychus thing, where there is a pretty solid debate of just like, was this really happening? Like pack hunting, was this really happening? Was this not happening? What was going on here? What form is this taking? There's enough evidence that it's just like, yeah, Majungasaurus ate each other. Like,
Right.
enough of the time that that several individuals in the already incredibly fragmentary dinosaur fossil record show Majungasaurus feeding marks. Presumed Majungasaurus feeding marks.
Now, you may say, if other theropods didn't eat each other, or did eat each other, why aren't there many specimens of other ones that have bite marks that come from conspecifics? And I would point you to the quality of the fossil record. This could just be we have enough Majungasaurus that we're catching this. This is not necessarily evidence that it did not happen in other theropods. I am confident that they occasionally ate each other.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like to just elaborate a little bit further on some of the lines of evidence, and because I've pulled up the paper
Okay.
that describes cannibalism in it, which is fun because it's
Oh, good. I was trying to pull up.
it's prior
Couldn't
to
find it.
it's fun because this paper still calls it Majungatholus, so it's prior to
Yeah.
to doing that. But some other lines of evidence also include that like the bite marks seen on both the sauropods and the other Majungasaurus remains have kind of like crenulations on them that match pretty well the serrations that we see on Majungasaurus teeth.
Oh, interesting.
It's
Yeah,
namesake.
so and like looking at the shape of the teeth corresponds to the structure of the bites in both on all of the elements, the sauropods and the other Majungasauruses, and they do also compare it to both the like shape of the teeth and the shape of the jaws of other known carnivores from the Maivarano. So they compare it to Mexicosaurus, Majungasaucus, Trematochampsa, and Trematochampsa. I should say there's only 4 things that they're comparing, and they also make the argument that like the structure of the jaws of those other things are like, it's not that the bites are like a perfect match to Majungasaurus from what I can see in my very quick reading, but more so that they're like very clearly not a match for the other things, especially the crocodilians, which have like pretty differently shaped mouths and differently arranged teeth. So I think there's several good lines of evidence that these bite marks are coming from Majungasaurus.
Yeah, and I don't disbelieve it at all. Like, again,
No.
my point was a broader,
Yes.
a broader how
It's a good
to
one.
evaluate this stuff thing. I think it's very likely these hate each other.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I don't think. Wasn't it also a factor of the Jurassic Fight Club episode? Doesn't the mother like? Let me get this straight. The male Majungasaurus or Majungatholus kills the baby and eats it on camera. And then the mother comes back and is enraged by this. I think that's George Blasing's actual quote. And kills the male. And then I remember specifically tears out and eats his liver. Like the eagles
Yes.
to Prometheus on the rock.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's. I mean, I think that's based on something. But
What a show.
yeah, I would just very quickly. I don't want to make this any longer, but the is it Maivarano?
Maivarano.
We've
Maivarano.
gone back and forth on
I'm
pronunciation.
gonna say I like how
episode.
Dalton said it. The Maivarano Formation is not like a wasteland. There's a lot of cool stuff there.
Yeah.
There's Titanosaurs, there's Majungasaurus, there's, like we said before, Mexicosaurus, little Noasaurs. There are several very weird birds, including Falcatechilus, which has like basically re-evolved the tall maxilla and is like a murder toucan. It's a toothy toucan, not a murder toucan. It's not a toucan. It just looks like one. And then there are, of course, the most important. There's like some weird Allotherian mammals, I think Allotherians. And then the best and most important boys, the crocodiles, which include Erypisuchus, like a gorgeous Erypisuchus, which must have gotten there and been pretty unchanged because like they had to get they're in the same genus as the other ones and they look basically the same as like the Brazilian ones, so they had to get there before they split. Some stuff that's Majungasaurus, which is this very gnarly looking ancient croc. some that I can't say more on because they're being actually worked on, and then the best boy, Simasuchus. And he
and Beelzebufo, the least we
yes,
forget.
and then
Frog.
yes, Big Frog, who is not as big but still big.
Not as big.
But yeah, so it's like it's happening
really
place.
cool.
It's diverse.
Tons of snakes.
Oh right, and the Madsoians, right?
Like
So, yeah.
there's a very solid reason why in our episode on Prehistoric Planet, as these guys just stare menacingly at their food. That's what's happening
they're
here.
They're conspiring.
A controversial statement. I think Prehistoric Planet might have done a slightly better job representing this place and time than Jurassic Fight.
You know,
It may,
Wow.
it may have done so.
Why would
Just a
you
little.
say something so controversial? But it's like I know that one of Dalton's points in that episode of discussion was that it would be really great to have a whole episode just dedicated to that
yeah.
time and place.
They,
Oh yeah.
Like there's so much happening there. It's so
I
interesting.
was going to say that, like, in terms, if you want to learn and kind of experience about the Maeverano Formation, the best place to do it is to watch the episodes of Prehistoric Planet that feature it. If someone could make a supercut of all of the Madagascan portions of Prehistoric Planet, I think, like, that section probably beyond all others for me just like blew me away. Like, I was like, this is almost perfect. Like, it's just
You're
tremendous. And their Majungasaurus, I like more than the Majungasaurus, and I like the old blind one that is kind of struggling to feed itself. And it's a good protagonist. It's such a good like animal protagonist to follow around, like the
Dalton.
mom T-Rex and Walking with Dinosaurs. And it's just perfect. Like a gush, and I go on. I won't.
Does your local museum? I thought your museum has a pretty nice exhibit of Madagascan stuff. I'm
Malagasy.
trying to say.
It does not. Oh, it has a
Madagascar.
small shelf of it because, as we mentioned,
Or is that all in the collection?
the collections have a lot of stuff from Madagascar, and it's because Kraus is there,
Okay.
and Joe Surdich also did a lot of stuff in Madagascar. But so there's a good amount of Malagasy material at the Denver Museum. There is also a small kind of shelf that they've set aside with some of that in the prehistoric hall. There was at a time a traveling, and I imagine the exhibit still exists. There's like a traveling exhibit on dinosaurs of the Southern Hemisphere, which
I was about to say I saw it at the MPM years ago.
it's great. And if you ever get the chance to go to it, go to it. It has a great Madagascar section, and the Denver Museum supplemented some of the exhibit when it came to Denver with some of the stuff from our collection.
Stony Brook, right? Because Kathy Forrester was very
Well, Kraus was at Stony Brook
like
when
Avis.
it all
And-
started.
Right. So okay,
Yeah,
that's the connection.
I don't know. I think he's
Okay.
really one of the people who was most heavily involved with getting back there. But it seems to have continued, which is interesting. So I think we've probably covered everything with this animal we need to talk about. Should we go ahead and rank it?
Rank it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm gonna make one very brief point because we'll talk more about it at Carnotaurus. But the osteoderms and the integument here would not have been unreasonable prior to like last year, so I don't blame them for that.
Right.
And we'll talk more about that in the next Abelisaur.
Especially because it's the same model from JWE1.
Yeah. I don't even know what to pick. We're spoiled for good choices.
I think the gray.
As long as it's not the raw hamburger color, we're okay.
I do like the red accent, but
I
Yeah,
like
I
the
do
red
too.
the
Yeah.
red face.
We could try to make it look like the one from Prehistoric
Jurassic
Planet.
Fight Club.
No. Okay.
Make it green with a red face.
okay. Amelia, what do you think of the creature?
I like it a lot. I have somehow not mentioned this the entire video. My secret is I like Abelisaurs a lot. They're probably my favorite dinosaurs. If I were to ever decide that I hated myself and wanted eternal stress and agony and work on a dinosaur of some kind, it would be an Abelisaur probably. Like I could only see myself making that leap for one of these dumbasses. Like I love them. They're so goofy, but not in a way that's like ugly. Like they're ugly in a cute way. And I don't mean like in the bulldog way, because I don't think bulldogs are ugly in a cute way. They're just ugly. But whatever. I'm sure I'll get hate mail for that.
You'll get it from me. Don't worry.
I'm sorry. I don't like because I know what's going on osteologically with the face. And it soils it. Anyways, I like it. I'm torn because like it's not as good as Carnotaurus. but I do really, really like it. And it is pretty spot on, besides for the elbows and half of the length of the arm. I like it. I'm giving it an S. Yeah, I like it.
I'm also going to give it an S. I really like the designs in this game that I would feel could, I don't want to say pass for paleo art, but you know what I mean by that. And I think this would. There are certainly some inaccuracies. The forelimbs is probably the most glaring one because they're not depicted as vestigial. I don't really care. I think it's a really good evocation of the animal, and the amount of accuracy in the skull. Like, this is a perfect skull on this thing, and that to me puts this firmly in test here.
I'm just firmly gonna agree. This is like one of my closet favorite dinosaurs to put in the game. It looks so good. I really like how it moves. I think it just animates really, really well. And it looks just so damn good in the parks that I love. I put it in everything. I always try to make a little island and have them on there, which is fun. This man gets an S tier. S for sausage.
Oh my god, yeah.
I like that. James, I think you're next.
It's you, Alex.
James has
No.
already gone. It's you, Alex.
I'm super cool. I like S for sausage, and I also, like Amelia, have a huge soft spot for not just Abelosaurs, but I also really like Noasaurs, despite the frustration and fear that they put me in regards to a certain thing, which maybe you'll find out about at some point in the future, in which Dalton smiles sheepishly, because he hopes for chaos and nothing else. And I like this guy a lot, and I have controversial opinions about this one relative to Carnotaurus even. So S for Majungasaurus. Also, the fact that it interacted with Simasuchus in real life is an immediate S tier.
But
It was
it ate
less-
it.
Well,
It's fine. It has it inside of it.
As close as you can get.
It's as close as you can know something. Is to eat it.
I too have a strong affinity towards Abelosaurs and Noasaurs. I think Ceratosaurs, Sensulato are very cool. I really like this design. I think the skull is beautiful and essentially perfect. I'm not bothered by the tooth issue. I don't love the midlines like spikes, and not because they're unreasonable, because we'll talk more about that with Ceratosaurus. It's certainly not an unreasonable thing to do. I don't know. It's just not to my taste. And I think I'm gonna have to be a voice of slight dissent. I think if the arms were a little shorter, it'd get an S for me. And I'm not a huge stickler for accuracy, but it just adjusts the silhouette of the animal enough to where, like, I would love to see just torso and the Naruto run. Like, I would really love that. But I will give this an extremely high A. Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we put Majungasaurus. I'm going to have to scroll for this one because my laptop's screen is smaller. It'll go into B tier, and then it'll pop up into S tier. I can't scroll while holding
took a brief sojourn in B tier.
Because I can't scroll while holding it, and I can't put it up at the top of the screen and make the screen scroll. So it has to make a pit stop. But with that said, it is now time to
Spin
that wheel.
Round and round it goes. Roll it, man.
Oh my god.
Oh.
No.
Let's
We got
Dreadnoughtus. Aren't we all excited for Dreadnoughtus? We had to make some changes to our schedule because of holiday travel delays, so we're going to be doing Dreadnoughtus next week, and I hope you're all very excited.
thank you, everybody, for watching our video about Majungasaurus. A little brief reminder that if you really like Skeleton Crew videos, we'd really appreciate it if you consider supporting us on Patreon. Having the support from our patrons really enables us to take the time we need to take to make these videos for you, edit them, and hopefully going forward, make even new kinds of videos that cover new topics and new games and paleontology in different ways. So any support we get from you guys is really, really appreciated. If you can, please consider it. If you do support us on Patreon, you'll have access to a bunch of benefits, including access to our patron-only Discord server, the ability to vote in patron polls, which we're planning to use in the next year to help us target some of the new kinds of content we want to make, and, of course, getting your name at the end of all of our videos in the credits, which we're going to start scrolling on screen right now. Now, our most generous patrons are also going to get in every video, and have been getting in every video, a verbal shout out from us at the Skeleton Crew. And as of this current recording, we need to thank a list of people. And that list of people comprises Benjamin Seepser, nickname 3110, Philip Fico, AK92, Christopher Bellis Jones, Adam Olos, Dan O'Kyrus, King Zashu, Max Ironpaw, original username, Pythonic, Swamp Ape Science, and Wheat. Yes, thank you all. Yes, and thank you to all of our patrons.
Yes.
Everything you do makes it more and more possible for us to, again, put the effort we need to put into making these videos as good as they can be. 2024 is shaping up to be a really exciting year for the Skeleton Crew. We are hoping to diversify a lot of the stuff we make, and God willing, a lot of our really cool papers are going to come out, and so we'll be able to feature not only some breaking research in our field, but breaking research that we've conducted. We're really excited to share it all with you. Thank you so much for the year of support. In 1 year, we've gone from no subscribers to over 7,000, and we are beyond excited to see what 2024 might bring. So thank you, each and every one. Have a good night, happy holidays, happy new year, and we will see you
Happy
in
New Year.
2024.
See you.
Bye bye.